Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with the all-access Amalgam Comics. Today's fused fighter brings new meaning to the phrase, clothes make the man, combining one guy with an array of powerful armored suits with another that only needs a ring. Guess Tony Stark's still a few years away from that revelation. Let's take a look at Iron Lantern #1 and see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. Speaking of heads, that's what takes up much of the cover here, with various characters' disembodied noggins taking a gander at our main hero. Except the shark, who seems pretty disinterested. Maybe Shark Week is coming up and he's already dreading people going up to him saying, "Hey, you gonna watch? Huh? Shark Week?" Yeah, that'd get annoying pretty quick. In the background appears to be the titular lantern, with various cables and wires extending from it. Some hero. He's obviously charging his energy source by siphoning car batteries in the parking lot. Written by Kurt Busiek, with art by Al Williamson and a bunch of people's names for some reason. Odd. As well as Christy Skeel in Digital Chameleon. If I mispronounced that last name for Christy, I apologize. We begin in the uncharted depths of space, where Iron Lantern is on his way to Oa, the living planet, dropping off a new inmate. A combination of Hector Hammond and MODOK, this is Hector, the highly evolved creature totally oriented on revenge. After securing his foe, Lantern goes to charge his armor at the central power battery, while musing about hoping to someday answer some curious questions about his planet-sized benefactor. But not today. I've got business back on Earth. Urgent business! Oa, the living planet, does not have any bathrooms. It's really inconvenient. At Stark Aircraft, its owner, Hal, is a no-show, and that seems to really irritate a visiting senator. And with that structure in the background that looks like an arch, it kind of makes him look like he just hopped in from off-panel in a humorous fashion. Blast it! Is Hal Stark running an aircraft factory or a sewing circle? Plot twist, it's both. Sure, it seems weird and pointless, but just imagine if you could make it work. The whining is enough to convince Pepper Ferris to test the new S-41 aircraft herself, and either this is a color error or she quickly changed into a different flight suit. Stuart Rhodes and Happy Kalmaku quietly exchange dialogue to let the reader know that they're aware of Hal's dual identities. The man in question is returning to terra firma, so why is he looking back at it? Why is it in the background? Was he distracted and passed it by? Maybe because he starts reminding himself about how he got the armor in the first place. He was testing a new stationary flight simulator when a green energy pulled him away, taking him to a crashed alien ship. The strange energy suddenly cut out, causing the pod to crash as well. Even with shrapnel in his chest, he crawled to the vessel and found a dead alien, who might be, at least in part, one of the Manhunter robots, but is named Roman Sir. With the occupant deceased, and Hal not that far behind, he calls dibs on the tech and builds a very Mark I-looking suit of armor, powered by a lantern battery. He'd eventually tussle with the aliens that caused the crash in the first place, and debut to the world as what the media called the Iron Lantern. Yes, a guy in a green power suit. I totally see where the media would have derived iron from. After all, vegetables are green because they have so much iron in them. That's just science. Meanwhile, the engines on the experimental plane have cut out, and the controls won't respond. Pepper suspects sabotage as she enters deadfall, but before ejecting, she's caught by Lantern, who escorts her back to the airfield. Later, at a reception for the visiting senator, Rhodes, who designed the engines the S-41 operated on, echoes the idea of foul play, just as Pepper walks in with Happy. And she just tears right into him after he insinuates this is a date. In front of God and everyone, she just straight up mocks his mechanic skills and says she only joined him out of pity. And there goes so much likability she could have had. Hal approaches, complimenting her work with the plane today, though internally wants to hold back hitting on her because she's an employee. The senator blunders towards them, deriding Stark's irresponsibility and not approving of the flight being undertaken by a woman. This really ticks Pepper off, so much so that her dialogue bubble has extra spikes, maybe to jab him with. And not just because of the obvious sexism, but because it was uttered by her own father, so she storms out.
I don't have to stand for this.
Oh, would you prefer to be seated during the continued mockery? We've got a chair over there that no one's using.
The politician sends Kyle O'Brien after her. Described in a caption as being another Iron Lantern, he does as he's told, to a point. He gives up the chase to deal with something else in spite of his boss. The redhead's walk is interrupted by the sight of a gem floating in midair. Drawn to make contact with this strangely familiar object, because leaving it alone would have been the smart thing to do, it begins enveloping her until she becomes Madame Sapphire, willing to do as someone asks for having awakened her. Not sure if she means the gem or if Madame S is talking to Pepper or some unseen benefactor. While it's Pepper Ferris that falls, it's someone else that rises.
Dark Knight or Skywalker. It's the Amalgam Universe, so it could well be both.
Kyle is hacking his way into a secret sub-basement, inner monologue mentioning that he stood in for Lantern as the Green Guardsman for a time, and now wants to destroy his predecessor's armor and take his place. As Senator Ferris is spewing a lot of vague axioms about how things were done in his day, the building begins shaking. The cause? Outside, Sapphire has summoned from the ground a shark monster called Great White.
His uncle Pretty Good Orange and second cousin So-So Mauve were not available.
Hal quickly ducks into his office, activates a security code that uses half the Green Lantern Corps oath, nice touch, and his armor is unloaded. The Senator, having seen where Stark ran to, has his men bust down the door, only to find the room empty.
That means Hal is a ghost!
Also, I'm pretty sure this is a typo and it's supposed to be another thing coming. But for all I know, there really is a phrase, got another think coming. But whatever. Outside, Great White is wrecking stuff with his laser eyes, and Lantern is curious how the mechanical being was reactivated.
Not wanting to be outdone by Dr. Evil or his son Scott, someone made a shark with frickin' laser beams inside its head.
That's when Madame Sapphire shows up, doing that whole attack while suggesting you and your enemy were an item thing. Finding his pilot/crush has somehow turned evil again, he takes a blast, making it seem more effective than it was, then uses his lantern to create a rocket that launches Sharkbot beyond Earth's atmosphere, and somehow still able to hear its enraged roar, despite how little air there is for sound to travel on.
He's angry because he knows you're gonna make him wear pants. Don't get me wrong, Stark, I'm with you on this, but this time Levi's has their work cut out for them.
When Great White breaks free of his harness, Hal creates a giant construct of his armor to match his size and strength. While he expends a considerable amount of energy to do so, Sapphire traps the Senator's men and makes off with him. At the same time, Happy, working on a gut feeling about the power battery, takes Rhodes to a restricted area in the lab and are surprised by Kyle, who uses knuckle dusters on them so he can take the power for himself. Rhodes seems knocked out at first, but Happy's a bit more resilient.
That was a pretty good punch, kid. You hit hard. But me? I was all-battalion boxing champ when I was in the service. I hit harder.
And by service, I don't mean the army. I mean food service. You have no idea how ugly things can get in a Subway restaurant during the lunch rush.
While Hal is getting thrown around in space, Happy is berating the treacherous substitute until O'Brien grabs a fire extinguisher and wallops the mechanic with it, citing his motivation succinctly of always having been a nobody. He grabs the battery just as Lantern and Great White are charging at each other all dramatic-like. Power to the suit is disconnected, leaving only an emergency reserve, so the construct vanishes. Taking a chance, he flies into his foe's mouth and uses the last of his power to detonate the monstrosity from within. Unfortunately, he's running on empty and slowly being pulled by Earth's gravity, so it's fitting he's green because he's in quite a pickle. Kyle makes off with the battery. Madame Sapphire is still taking her alter ego's dad somewhere, and that shooting star in the background is, of course, Hal, whose armor is melting in re-entry as he laments not doing more for his friends. The comic ends on the dark side of the moon, as it's revealed who manipulated Kyle and awakened Sapphire. Mandarinestro.
Which is not at all a labored stretch for a portmanteau. Not awkward in the least. So that was Iron Lantern, and I thought it was pretty good.
There were times that the narrative captions or the dialogue kind of felt like something from older comics, maybe 60s, 70s era. There's just this tone about everything that seems like it was an intentional throwback, and I think it works pretty well. We get just enough on some characters that you understand their relationships, and in Kyle's case, some of his motivations. Though there were exceptions, not exactly sure why Pepper thought it was a good idea to berate Happy in front of all those people. He seemed like a perfectly nice guy. If she didn't want to consider it a date, that's fine, but I don't think she needed to be so vicious about it. And when I got to think more about it, the idea of someone as inventive as Tony Stark having the powers of a Green Lantern to instantly create anything by imagination and willpower could be really cool. Unfortunately, we don't really get a lot of that. There aren't that many constructs to be had, and while effective, the ones that are made seem mostly basic. But hey, single-issue adventure, what are you gonna do?
Though I'll give it points for the dramatic cliffhanger. Even though there was never going to be an issue 2, they were still writing the issue as if it was an ongoing, and that was a good way to leave things in that case. Next, we're taking a look at the Magnetic Men, featuring Magneto. And I'm sure he's going to take it real well now that he's been relegated to a featured act.
Well, I guess he compensated by having his name be the largest on the cover. He's in the background, hunched over, gesturing his hands all boogity-boogity-boogity-like at the two groups about to collide. His titular team and the Sinister Society, who also appear to be robots.
Would you believe this fight started because of a disagreement over who represented mechanical beings in media better, Lieutenant Commander Data or Johnny Five? Good thing no one ever brought up the little girl from Small Wonder, or we'd all be dead right now.
Written by Tom Payer, with art by Barry Kitson, Dan Panosian, and Matt Webb, we begin with The End!
Well, that was a quick read. Overall, I'd say there wasn't enough story, it was poorly paced, and it's criminal that people were charged $2 for a single panel. But I'd also say that those same people probably got more of their money's worth than with some 20-plus page story of the last 8 years from a certain publisher in particular. Good night, everybody.
Actually, Mags is holding the head of Bismuth, proclaiming he'll never need rebuilding again. A new character, Mr. Mastermind, points out this isn't one of his flesh-and-blood soldiers, which I guess he has now? Just a robot copy. But he's apparently wrong, as Bismuth's head is being reattached to his body. The Magnetic Men's magnetometric computers, patent pending I'm sure, had somehow gained unintended sentience, and started to genuinely believe in Magneto's crusade to protect mutants, until they were slain by the impossible Mod. But if only God can create life, then pray he grants his servant the strength to restore it.
God, if this works out, I've got a few requests myself. And this time, only 2 of them are machete-related.
Eric begins giving his machines a magnetic jumpstart, though the specialized computers seem slow to respond. His underling warns not to overdo it, and gets called a worm for his troubles. Totally not a jerk move at all. He says he'd sacrificed himself for his creations, but still uncalled for. On a splash page, we see it's finally worked, as the Magnetic Men are restored in upgraded bodies. Though it looks like Biz still has that stutter.
Sweet. So, you want to get to the whole list today, or you just want to take a couple a day? I'm flexible.
They almost immediately start arguing, because they had agreed to keep their sentience a secret, but Nickel doesn't feel like doing that anymore, and Cobalt seems to suggest getting rid of him for it, though all it takes to end their bickering is a simple stop from Mags. He doesn't yell or otherwise raise his voice, and he seems more stern than angry. I actually think it's an interesting choice, showing how he commands them without actually commanding them. He reveals he discovered their evolved state, and that's why, no sooner than he has revived them, decides to retire the Magnetic Men.
I would have gotten you all gold watches, but since you're robots named after different metals, that felt both redundant and weird.
This comes as troubling news, as they still want to serve their maker and defend mutants from the likes of Will Magnus and his Sentinels. However, Eric feels that even though they're mechanical, their lives are still worth preservation just like any others, and ever since his Brotherhood was killed, Magneto swore never to send living beings into combat. So Mr. Mastermind, whose antennae are missing for some reason, uses his powers of illusion to make the robots appear human. Their appearances can be changed at will, but are also susceptible to emotional or physical distress. On top of that, they have paperwork for their new identities, with jobs like photographer, construction worker, and antimony being a supermodel. Take that as you will. Nickel thinks it's insane to waste their talents and forget past struggles in the pursuit of money.
Hey, if you don't care about getting paid for any work, you could always start a YouTube channel.
Magnus responds to their objection with a fancier version of "because I said so," and magnetically kicks 3 of them out, with all their human forms dissipating as a result. He's more concerning with antimony, but she reminds him that she has no emotions to soothe, so she goes to catch up with her comrades and orders Bismuth to follow. Cobalt, Nickel, and Iron don't like the seeming contradictory way they've been treated, but their master has a force field up and can keep them out as long as he wants. Mr. Double M tries empathizing with his leader, but Buckethead calls him a worm again. Twice on this page, classy, making to wonder if maybe that's actually supposed to be the guy's real name. Eric shows off his evil brother's latest creation, something that 3 mutants died to bring him. One of billions of Insectobots, programmed to cause destruction and record it for Will Magnus's entertainment. I guess no one will lend him their Netflix password. Eric plans to use the machine to trace his brother's location to stop him, solo, because especially now, he has no one else to do it.
Weird how committed he was to sending non-living beings to war, to the point that he throws out his bionic creations once he started viewing them as alive in their own right. But he still seems to have human followers that he's okay with sacrificing. But remember, the Magnetic Men are based on his fallen crew, so call it favoritism.
We go to London, where the team is trying to start their lives as ordered. We got the reluctant model, a rather enthusiastic photographer, and street musician already giving their careers a go. Considering Antimony and Nickel are based in part on the twins Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, that makes his calling her baby and insistence on pouting more very much yuck. An energy blast hits a bus, so 4/5 of the team shed their disguises without a second thought and head to the rescue. Though no one seems badly hurt, Bismuth, still looking like Snapper Jones, is blamed for the attack, as eyewitnesses saw the blast fire from his guitar mid-song. Even though he had nothing to do with it, he runs off and hides in an alley while reverting to his usual look. Unfortunately, that's when he encounters Sonic Claw, the robot who caused the attack using sound.
The power rock used for evil. At least I think I know now what the plot of Bill and Ted 4 is going to be. Unless it's already the plot of Bill and Ted 3. I still haven't seen it.
Just as the rest of the Magnetic Men are done with the rescues and realizing they've exposed their civilian identities, a portal opens and more evil robots step through, comprising the rest of the Sinister Society, Coltron, Vance Cosmic, Deathborg, and Black Vulture, whom I think each use a different unique medal to either DC or Marvel, rather than real-life medals of their heroic counterparts. As they begin mopping the floor with the Magnafolk, Magneto has tracked his brother to Krakoa, the living dinosaur island, which seems to be so named for having soil that restores extinct life, not that the island is alive and happens to have dinosaurs on it. Really, it could have gone either way. Leave it to my mad brother to make his home in the thick of such unnecessary danger.
Now, if he wanted to build a theme park here, that'd be one thing. Come to think of it, I made Cobalt a financier and Iron a construction worker. They could build the attractions, and maybe Will and I could finally work out our differences. Unless the whole park becomes a death trap and attendees end up getting eaten, which is almost a certainty. Skip it. Thanksgiving dinner is awkward enough as it is.
He makes his way past the dino defenses and heads for the Citadel in the distance, only for a beacon to activate, meaning his metallic charges are in trouble. Within the lair, Will's right-hand robot, Jocasta, informs him of Magneto's presence and sudden departure. Doubting his bro is such a coward, he orders the dismantling of the compound and evacuation of the island before the Master of Magnetism returns. The magnetic men are all unconscious, at the mercy of two more members of the Society, Chemodam and Quasimodox, all creations of Will Magnus who hope to vivisect their cousins and learn the secrets of their personality transfer and gain human bodies for themselves. Magneto bursts in, making a standard if you've hurt them threat that he then immediately finds unnecessary because all he has to do is give them a little charge and they're up. He again pays special attention to antimony as the Sinister Society arrives to take them on, and despite getting beaten before, our heroes are confident they'll win now that their master is with them, and gets top billing again. Boosted by Mags's powers, they prove more than effective against the Sinisters, and Eric deals with their leaders, demanding to know why they abducted his creations. Quasi says they wanted a chance at having normal lives. Either that, or punish Will Magnus for making them such uggo robo-bodies.
When you think about it, it's actually Will Magnus's fault for bothering to program them with vanity subroutines.
At first royally ticked off that these fellow enemies of his brother are the reason why he abandoned a chance to end his threat to mutant kind, Magneto realizes that, like the Society, he too has been driven solely by personal ambition. He disables the enemy fighters with a pulse blast and tells his team they're leaving, and the Society can join if they accept Eric's apology.
Yeah, no. Magneto was clearly unaware that these robots existed, so I'm not sure what he's apologizing to them for. It's good he's realized that his brother is a threat to more than just mutants, but the Sinisters tried to kill his team in order to be normal, and threatened innocent lives in the process. Even with a hint of sympathy to their cause, they don't deserve an "I'm sorry" from anyone in that room.
Both teams arrived via aircraft to Krakoa, to find no fortress or dinosaurs. It seems the Insectobots were used to wipe the island of all trace of Magnus, and they're too used up and dead to use to locate him again. Plus side, they won't be able to cause all that mass havoc they were originally intended for. Unless someone reminds Will he could probably just make more tiny deathbots. Though it seems they've lost this one, the comic ends on a group shot, with Magneto assuring them that when united, the oppressed, be they mutant, human, or robot, will always have hope, and they can never lose. Next, Detective Dinosaur!
Well, shoot, we could have had a T-Rex and a deer stalker and a magnifying glass he can barely operate because of his tiny, stubby arms. Now I really wish there was an issue 2. That was Magnetic Men featuring Magneto, and I thought it was good. There were some interesting ideas and directions they were taking, but I'm kind of iffy on how it wraps up.
It gives the Magnetic Men a new challenge, trying to be part of society without their maker, who doesn't want them to end up for realsies dead. The Society, also artificial beings, want the very thing that the Magnetic Men have been given and are participating in begrudgingly. Though characterizations can range from creepy, like the aforementioned squickiness of Nickel, encouraging Antimony to be more saucy for the camera, to the head-scratching, as Magneto is apologizing to the aggressors even though he really didn't do anything to them. To his own crew, maybe, for being too cold and dismissive, he should apologize, but the Society are lucky he doesn't just rip them apart. I mean, yeah, it did help him learn a lesson, but still. I liked the art well enough, but I thought it was weird how Bismuth's head kept changing shape so much. I don't know if that's just a manifestation of his power via his personality, or an inconsistency of the art. Some of the newer nods to individual DC and Marvel characters are kind of obvious, like Snapper Carr, Vulture, John Henry Irons being the basis for Iron's civilian identity. Those were all clever touches, but there were more that were less obvious, likely because I've never followed the Metal Men, so I'd recommend looking online if you were personally curious.
I will say that I found the books we looked at today a bit more interesting and engaging than the ones we looked at last week. Will this trend continue upwards, or spiral down next week? Only one way to find out. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.